Hello, my name is Jennie Beeson and I'm the Program Associate here at the National Youth Advocacy Coalition. This is the first training module in your Safe Spaces training for creating safe spaces for LGBTQ youth. First, we're going to start with a little bit about NYAC. We're a social justice organization working to end discrimination against LGBTQ youth. And one way we do this is by working with youth service providers like you to create spaces that are safer for youth. Now, one of the ways that we've done this is with the Safe Zone project, and it's a project to help show that spaces are safe for youth. As you can see here, it shows what the Safe Zone posters materials are used for. So underneath it reads, the Safe Zone symbol is a message to LGBTQ youth and adult allies. A person displaying the symbol is one who will be understanding, supportive, trustworthy if an LGBTQ youth needs help, advice, or someone to talk to. So by placing these materials or posters in your space, you're able to tell youth that you are that you're open to them and that you are willing to be an ally. But it's more than that, right? It's more than writing on the wall. It's more than announcing sometimes, and that's why you're here in this training. So first we're going to identify the objectives of what we're doing here and what we're going to talk about in this first section. So we want to understand why safe spaces are important, and then we want to start giving you the tools to create these safe spaces, and that includes giving you resources and activities to make that happen. So why should we announce that spaces are safe? There's an importance, I think, of verbalizing and intentionality around anti-oppressive spaces by including all the identities of LGBTQ youth. We want to make sure that we're showing that spaces are safe and that you're inclusive. And one way that I talk about safe spaces is about inclusive spaces. So what is the reality of what we're trying to do? Let's understand why this work is necessary and why we're talking about LGBTQ youth in the first place. Because of the unique things that youth might face, they might be at higher risk for these certain things. And this is a report made by Caitlin Ryan and her project group, learning about family rejection for LGBTQ youth might be linked to higher risk factors for suicide and drugs and sexual unprotected sex. So we're going to link to, there's a link to this at the end that you can further look into that project. And here's another one. This one is really important. It illustrates the role that adults can play and how really adults can make a difference. So you see that 26% of gay teens can be kicked out of their homes and made homeless. But they also report that in the shelters or the places where they go to seek refuge, they might also be experiencing damaging issues to themselves. And so that's I think one of the reasons why we need to make sure that there are responsible adults. And this one is also linked to in your resource page. So this is The Shared Heart. It's a book about the portraits and stories celebrating lesbian, gay, and bisexual young people, and it kind of tells about stories that they go through. So when we compare this to the previous slide, we can use data that organizations have found that they've come up with, but we can also use the actual words and experiences and listen to the voices of youth right out of their mouths to help understand and to personalize this process so that we know that things are happening. And this is just one example. This person's name is Nathan, and he's kind of just describing what it feels like to be a gay person and a young person at the same time, and how it can be alienating and a lonely process. But I think it's important that when we listen to these youth voices, that we also understand that youth can be empowered by their identities and proud, and they can find ways to understand themselves through these kind of identities that are provided, or identity names at least. And so it's not always just gloom and doom if you realize that you're an LGBTQ youth. It can also be something that's really empowering. And so we want to make sure that we facilitate this process of empowerment for all youth, and that includes LGBT. So this is one example of a shared model that we want to use. And it's called the 40 developmental assets, and it's a way of thinking about what we need to create healthy teenagers or healthy youth. And it's a shared model that you can find at the end of this section. I link to it in your resources page. So to facilitate the kind of experiences that are empowering for youth, we'll look at the kind of assets that we want to make sure that we help youth build on their own. And if you look through them, the assets under support, the assets under empowerment, under positive identity, all of those have to do with creating services and creating spaces that are competent and appropriate for LGBTQ youth and the different unique issues that they might have. So what we're first going to do is start with, what does safe mean? So you want to build safe spaces, but first we need to know what it means. And I'm going to read this definition because I think it's really important to understand each facet of it. So a safe space is the environmental product of a conscious set of decisions and actions taken by individuals to promote equality, fairness, nonviolence, and affirmation of the unconditional value of all peoples, where youth are free to grow, thrive, and express their individual identities. And while this is, we need to make sure to know that this is a working definition. This is just what we mean by safe space when we talk about it in this training module, but there might be different ideas of what safe space means in other places. And while there is no complete safe space, no place where everyone feels completely at home and completely safe, I think we should recognize that creating a safe space means being willing to work towards it, and to make those conscious decisions to ensure safety. So when we talk to youth, or we talk to anybody really, there are some more simple ways that we can talk about safe spaces. And these are some quick definitions that can capture what safe space is more briefly. You know, places where I can go when I have no other place to go, where I feel loved, or where someone is on my side. Those are things that can really make a difference to somebody that might not be that hard to provide. So right now we're going to look at what's the difference between a safe space and maybe a not so safe space. And so what we're going to do is take a minute to think about this space, this scenario. So I'm going to read it to you. Lee goes to the local free clinic to have an STI check. Upon arrival, the nurse addresses Lee rudely and calls her son. Lee is unsure of how to fill out paperwork so her parents don't find out. Once inside, the doctor argues with Lee about whether or not she needs an STI check since she is only fooling around with girls. Now, take a minute, push pause, and kind of write down what issues are at play here that might not be so safe. So what's the difference? Here's an idea of what a safer space might look like. Lee goes to the local health clinic to get an STI exam. When she arrives, the nurse greets Lee and hands Lee forms with categories and questions that Lee can relate to. Once inside, the doctor gives Lee the full exam and helps Lee understand how to use a dental dam. So if you look at this, you can see that there are just minor switches in the way that the interaction occurred for this youth that makes it an entirely different a different experience, and maybe one that Lee will want to come back to later on. So if it were that easy just to be able to change your space so easily, then everybody would be doing it, right? But it seems like there are some barriers that people are experiencing, and we want to be real about that. That this sometimes it might not be the easiest thing, especially in an organization where there are more than one person involved in creating your space. So that's why we're going to talk about this through barriers. Many providers and youth-serving organizations face real barriers that can prevent spaces from being or transforming into safe spaces. So of course there are barriers to overcome, and these barriers, we have to turn them into smaller, more digestible bites, and that's how we're going to work through this process. So each of these barriers we want to talk about, and these are what are going to break out into the 6 modules. So you're in the first module right now, which is the introduction, and then you move on to attitudes, which talks about values and kind of misconceptions. Language is going to give you the terminology you need to talk about this. Inclusivity and representation is going to help you create your space to show more diverse aspects of your community. Resources and services is going to help you look at best practices and kind of think about assessing your own organization's resources and services. And then the final one is policies, and that one is going to talk about actual written policies and organizational culture as an important part. So how this training works, before we get into the meat of the training, it's meant to be a guide to an assessment of your organization. It really depends on your commitment and your desire to change your space and to really implement the kind of ideas that we're providing you. It's not a magical way to change what's going on. And so some of the ways that we're going to be able to do that is to use the pre-test and the post-test. So I would urge you to go on our website and download the training module pre-test, which comes with the post-test, so you can kind of track your process and see where you began and where you're going. And then of course the Safe Spaces training module worksheet is to follow along in your training, and it'll make more sense once you get to the second part. So now we're going to guide you through the final 6 videos. Make sure to access the resources that we talk about in each, that I talk about in each section, because that's really what's an important part of this training, is the resources that we link you to. And then you can always let us know if you have more resources that you'd like to share, and we do welcome that. And finally, before you get into it, here is our information at NYAC that you can find out more about us. And here is my contact information. So if you have any questions about this training or other trainings that we provide, then I would encourage you to contact me. All right, good luck on the rest of your trainings, and have fun.